Well, just to add my voice to all of these other voices full of praise, Philippe is everything that John said and more, and really an example of an extraordinary human being. So, good morning.
Good morning.
That's a good one. We live in a perilous age. This gathering is an expression not just of hope, but also of conviction and of our shared passion for the possible. The world needs more goodness today, but it also needs more greatness. And I define greatness as the courage to see more in order to be more. By which I mean the courage to look inside ourselves and see through our blind spots, challenge our comfort zones and our fixed assumptions, and never stop growing and learning and getting better. We must pay as much attention in these complex, uncertain times to what's going on in our inner world as we now do to the challenges of our outer world. If we hope to change the world, and we do, we must first change ourselves. And that begins with seeing ourselves more honestly and more deeply. I spend a significant amount of time working with CEOs of both for-profits and nonprofits, helping leaders to create cultures that better meet their people's core needs so their people can spend less time defending their value at work and more time adding value at work. Last Friday, I had a conversation with a CEO who's at a critical moment in his business. He's about to take his company public. What he's feeling, though, is exhausted from lack of sleep, anxious and quick to anger, and overwhelmed by the number of balls he has to keep in the air. Sound familiar? When I get home at night, he told me, I have nothing left to give my wife or my children. Just a day before I spoke to him last week, he learned that one of his parents had been diagnosed with an inoperable cancer. Another leader of a nonprofit that serves illegal immigrants told me last week that she's reached a breaking point, and so has every member of her staff. The stakes are so high, she said, and the desperation our clients are feeling is so great that we're all working around the clock. And I just don't know how much longer we can do it. At the biggest moment in their careers, these two leaders find themselves questioning whether the life they're living is worth the price they're paying to live it. What about you? I've been hearing stories like these from ordinary folks for many years. What's new is hearing them now from the people who run organizations too. After all, they have more resources and more help managing their lives than almost anyone. And many of them, in their private moments, say they just can't keep up anymore. What does that mean for everyone else below them, many of whom don't even have the most basic resources they need to prosper? And if you're not taking care of yourself, how can you possibly take good care of others? We're in, folks, a full-fledged energy crisis. And this one is personal. In order to solve their external challenges, leaders and organizations and all the rest of us must first address 4 human energy challenges. And the first one is fatigue. Most of us don't sleep enough hours at night to wake up feeling fully rested in the morning. At work, we move from meeting to meeting and email to email all day long, rarely taking time to renew or regroup. Our energy steadily diminishes as the days wear on, and in the evenings we return to our families running on empty or fumes. For organizations, the performance consequences show up in higher absenteeism, more accidents, more mistakes, lower performance, and lower engagement. And that's just fatigue. The second challenge is fear. Fear lurks in the background of most workplaces, intermittently grabbing center stage. Fear of falling behind, fear of change, fear of failure, and fear of losing our jobs. Fear that makes us less logical and reflective and more reactive and impulsive. Fear that paralyzes innovation and forward progress. The third human challenge is distraction. Distraction beckons us, doesn't it? The relentless stream of emails and texts that pour into our digital devices, the overload of news and information forever available at our fingertips, the number of tasks on our to-do lists, and the constant struggle to prioritize amid so many choices. The sheer volume of wasted time. And finally, the fourth human challenge, the ultimate human challenge, is indifference. Indifference is our default state when the work we do and the organizations we work for fail to give us a sense of purpose and meaning, or when we lose hope that we can make a difference in our own lives and in the lives of others. So there you have them: fatigue, fear, distraction, and indifference, the four killers of sustainable performance and of a life that works. I'd like to ask you to take out a pen and paper now, or if you prefer, you can do this very brief exercise on your phone. Call up whatever version of a blank page you have. So first, I'd like you to write down, if you're doing this on paper on the left-hand column, left-hand side of the page, a few adjectives that describe you at your best. Just 3 or 4, the first ones that come to mind. You at your best. Just 3 or 4 quickly. Okay? You got that? Good. Now I'd like you to write down on the right-hand side of the page, or below if you're on your phone, 3 or 4 adjectives that describe you at your worst. You don't have to show these to anybody. Okay. Now let me ask you the $64,000 question. Which one of these is you? Which one of these is you? I think most of us will agree that we're fully capable of being both, depending on the circumstances. But does that mean under stress and demand that you simply become a victim of your circumstances? Where does responsibility, where does personal responsibility fit in here? Don't we each have the power to take control of how we respond in any given situation, of how we show up in the world? Don't we have the capacity to ask ourselves, who do I want to be here? What would it look like to show up at my best? But we can't change what we don't notice. We must see more to be more. And once we do notice, once we learn to step back from our impulses and our emotions and observe them before acting them out, we give ourselves a chance about how to respond and a choice. That choice may be the only choice in your life that no one can ever take away from you. So how do you begin to notice? We call these the energy quadrants. The vertical axis is the quantity of your energy from low at the bottom to high at the top. The horizontal axis is the quality of your energy from negative on the left to positive on the right. 4 different ways that you can feel across a given day depending on what's happening. So how do you feel when you're performing at your best? Because that's how you have to feel to perform at your best. Think about it for a moment. What adjectives come to mind? Here are some that we hear over and over and over again. Energized, happy, optimistic, confident, engaged, enthusiastic. Does that sound right? That's why we call this the performance zone. Now that's all well and good. You already knew that. But what about when you're not feeling that way? What are you feeling, and what are the consequences? Because how you feel and more broadly, how the people who work in your organization feel profoundly influences how they perform. So the most common answer we hear about where people are when they're not in the performance zone is the survival zone. It still has energy attached to it, so it's still possible to work from there, and indeed it's been normalized in many organizations. You're expected to feel anxious and impatient and frustrated, aren't you? That's why they call it work. But we don't choose the survival zone. It chooses us. We fall into it whenever we experience a sense of threat or danger. Now that's terrific if there's a lion coming at you, because what happens in the survival zone is that your energy increases, your heart rate rises, your blood pressure goes up, your muscles tense, so you're in a better position to fight or to flee. But let's face it, how often is there a lion coming at you at work? Exactly. It can feel like a lion is coming at you at work, but unfortunately, the brain makes no distinction between a real lion and a much less serious threat, like a difficult conversation with your boss or with a colleague, or a sudden deadline you have to meet, or a problem you're having at home with one of your kids, the stuff that occurs every day in our lives. And the first thing that occurs in fear is that your vision narrows to the perceived threat and you stop being able to see much of anything else. It's as if I go up to this wall and I say to myself, oh my God, there's no escape from here. There's no way out. There's no exit strategy. But if you were to step back just one or two steps, what you would realize, and take a deep breath, what you would realize is there is an out. There is an out. There's an exit there. There's an exit there. There's an exit there. And of course, there's 5 other exits. But that's what fear does. It shuts down hope and rationality and imagination. We can't avoid fear, but we have to be willing to walk into fear because fear is out there. When fear gets high enough, the prefrontal cortex, this thinking part of your brain, literally shuts down, and your amygdala, a little tiny thing in the middle of your brain, sometimes referred to as fear central, takes over. And that was great thousands of years ago in the savannah when sheer survival was job number 1. But it's not so good for jobs that require thinking. How many of you have one of those? Okay, well, about a third, but okay. And finally, if we spend too much time in the survival zone, we eventually land in the burnout zone. Sounds familiar. The burnout zone, though, is the worst place from which to perform. You're feeling negative, and you're also running on fumes. Burnout is where life literally grinds to a halt. So all this begs one question, doesn't it? When you fall into the survival zone or the burnout zone, and you do fall into that zone, how do you get back to the performance zone? Because that's where you make life work. And the answer is the renewal zone. The final zone, low positive. This is the zone of rest and recovery. This is a zone that gets almost no respect in organizations, does it? Rest, we're told, and we eventually tell ourselves, is for slackers. Instead, unconsciously, we pattern ourselves after our technology, which operates at high speeds continuously for long periods of time. The problem is that human beings aren't meant to operate like machines, much less computers. We are designed to move rhythmically between spending and renewing energy. It's our most fundamental behavior. We inhale and we exhale. You don't get credit for being good at one or the other. Every system in our body pulses when it's healthy. Our heart rate rises and falls in response to demand. Our brain literally waves between high-frequency electrical activity and low frequency so we can be alert during the day and able to sleep at night. When we stop having that rhythmic wave, it messes with our life. Now, we first observed this in action many years ago in our work with professional athletes. At their best, athletes were intuitive geniuses at managing work-rest ratios, something we call periodization. When it came to performing, the most successful athletes, in other words, made the renewal of energy as important as the expenditure of energy. When we got struggling athletes to deliberately reestablish a dynamic balance between work and rest, physically, but also mentally and emotionally, spend and recover, these athletes started performing at high levels again to a remarkable degree. To make this possible, we drew on the multidisciplinary science of high performance, physiology, neurochemistry, and psychology, and using those, we gave people and we give people a map of their lives that allows them to begin to navigate themselves. And I'm giving you a first view of that, what that inner life looks like and how it works through these energy quadrants. So what if we all made it our business to see more and exclude less, to embrace a bigger, more integrated view of yourself? I can still remember as a teenager growing up in the 1960s, the lyrics from the Beatles song, When I'm 64. You remember those? When I get older, losing my hair, many years from now. Well, to my astonishment, many years have passed, and I'm now 64, and I've been losing my hair for a long, long time. 2 weeks from today, I'll turn 65, and I have spent my entire adult life trying to see more in order to be more and helping others to do the same. I do this work in part because I need it myself. I spent too much time in my young adult life in the survival zone, too much time feeling like a victim, too much time defending and announcing my value at the expense of creating value in the world, too much time defaulting to my worst self. And ironically, the most profound change for me has been fully acknowledging and accepting my worst qualities right alongside my best qualities. By seeing more of what Zorba the Greek once called the full catastrophe, I find I can make more deliberate choices about the me that shows up in the world. Not all the time, but more of the time. Because we all have myriad ways to protect ourselves against our experiences of emptiness, despair, loneliness, and inadequacy. None of us is free of these feelings. They're an unalterable part of being human. And the irony is that when we can see our limitations and vulnerabilities and acknowledge them alongside our strengths and virtues, we become more human, not less. More capable, not less. The inner journey, seeing more and excluding less, has the power to supercharge our outer journey. John and his team have partnered. We are beginning to partner to bring the work I've started to introduce to you today, this building of human capacity, to the communities in which Operation Hope works. This is incredibly exciting to me. We are all capable of so much more than we think. At the end of the Pulitzer Prize-winning play, Angels in America, the character Pryor finds hope as he reflects on the scourge of AIDS that has taken the lives of so many of his friends. This disease, Pryor says, will be the end of many of us, but not nearly all. The world only spins forward. We will be citizens. The time has come. Bye-bye now. You are fabulous creatures, each and every one, and I bless you. More life, the great work begins. So bye-bye now. You are fabulous creatures, each and every one. More life, the great work begins. Hashtag resolve to evolve. Thank you.